You are listening to Let's Talk Trio on podcasts. Keep up with the latest episodes by downloading the Podbean app or stream episodes via our social media accounts. Search for Let's Talk Trio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This episode is sponsored by Student Access. Student Access, the leader in Trio software. Student Access is an online database solution that allows Trio programs to track their students' information, connect with students by text messages, streamline the APR, and work from anywhere, all online, with automatic updates for changes from the Department of Education. Their technical support team includes former Trio staff and has over 50 years of combined experience working with Trio. Make it easier to focus on your priority, the students. For more information and to request a free demo, visit their website at www.studentaccess.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-801-1232. That website again is www.studentaccess.com or 1-800-801-1232. Be sure to share your favorite episodes on your social media by tapping that share button. This is a great way to support the podcast. Now here's your host, Juan Rivas.
Thank you, Amelia, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, listener, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Trio. This is Season 6, Episode 18. I am your host, Juan Rivas. In today's episode, we have Daniel Krhin, Trio Executive Director at Ripon College. Daniel's on the podcast to talk about his own Trio experience and discuss a financial program tailored to Trio students. Coming up in just a bit, Daniel Krhin. A huge thanks to our individual supporters: Angelica Villalpando, Rosario Riley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Jeff Naputi, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Eric Lemaster, Jaded Electronics. A huge thanks also goes out to our corporate sponsors: TrioJoblist.com, Nosotros Education Center, TheTrioStore.com, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for graduation stoles. And Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can be a sponsor of the podcast. Head on over to Patreon and search for Let's Talk Trio. Choose one of 4 patron levels. You can support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. If you own a business and would like to run an ad on our podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast business PayPal account. Our handle is @LetsTalkTrio. Your support helps lift Trio voices. If you would like to nominate a participant, staff, advocate, or alumni to be in the podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. Again, a great episode featuring Daniel Krhin, Executive Director for Trio Programs at Ripon College. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. It's important to note that investing involves risk, and past performance is not indicative of future results. Any investment decision should be made based on your own research and with guidance of a qualified financial advisor. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of any affiliated companies or organizations.
Hi, Trio Nation. My guest on the Let's Talk Trio podcast holds undergraduate degrees in sociology, psychology, and secondary education from the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and a master's degree in educational administration from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He currently serves as the executive director for the U.S. Department of Education Trio Student Support Services Program since 1987, and was the director of the U.S. Department of Education's Trio McNair Scholars Graduate School Preparation Program for 10 years at Ripon College in Ripon, Wisconsin. He has been and continues to function as the main editor for Trio students who have gone on to earn a master's and PhD programs at the University of Wisconsin, Duke, the University of Minnesota, the University of Arizona, UCLA, the University of Michigan, the University of Cincinnati, Indiana University, and many more prestigious institutions. In his free time, my guest enjoys bicycle riding, boating, investing, reading, swimming, and traveling, and currently lives in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Daniel Krhin. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Juan. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with you and other people in the Trio Nation. So I'm excited to be here.
We welcome you. Thank you so much for giving us a bit of your time today and a little bit of your time on this podcast too.
Sure. Thank you.
So how are things in Wisconsin?
Well, they're great. Temperature-wise, it's unseasonably warm. It's 78 degrees today and sunny. And so it's a great day for biking, which I love to do. Wonderful. And so we'll be going to an apple orchard today and just kind of relaxing and hanging out. So that's our plan for today. But usually this time of year, it's much cooler. And sometimes we've even had snow in October. So this is really, we're thankful at this point.
Yeah, we were talking pre-show that you said it's unusually warm for Wisconsin in this time of year, and usually in Colorado we've got our first couple bouts of snow by this point. But yeah, I agree, unusually warm this year.
Yes, for sure. Yes, I've got relatives that live up near he's up in the mountains area of Colorado, so I know it's been snowing up there already. So yes, that's normal.
So you've had a storied career in Trio. What is something that you've learned in your time with the Trio programs?
Wow. How much time do we have here? Let's see. I've always been interested with my background in sociology about social stratification, differences between populations, demographics, how people come to be more well off than others based on circumstance or place in life. And so I've learned that, in Trio programs, we work with underserved, underinformed populations, I call these students. And so taking these students from no matter what their status is coming into college, some are hitting the ground running, others are barely getting out of bed, I say sometimes, humorously. They both need information. For sure. And which I want to focus on is that all of these students coming in have different needs, but they're all manageable. They're all, I do a lot of analogies with sports. That's part of my background. I always talk about measurement. That was part of my graduate school work. Measuring behavior, not about how smart somebody is. I emphasize that with my students in Trio, is that if you are not the best student in the class, all the things that I'm teaching you are measurable, like the important things like attendance and keeping a planner and taking good notes and getting tutoring. I could talk for an hour just on the tutoring program that I started years ago when I first started at Ripon College. It's a very unique model. It's totally counterintuitive to what most people would think about tutoring. And it's a highly used program, but students don't anticipate that they would ever be using it. So my point here is that I focus on behavior. That's what my background is. I measure behavior. I don't measure how smart somebody is because I don't know what that is. I don't know what intelligence is. I don't use those terms to describe people. I talk about their behavior. So that's something that I've learned a lot about change with students and making the moves to success.
That's fascinating. So we will do a deeper dive into your involvement in Trio, but can you give us a little bit of your Trio origin? What paths did you take to be the executive director at Trio?
Well, my background is I've got an education degree and I did some teaching for years and I did work in the mental health field for a number of years. And I had never really heard about Trio programs, although they've been around a long time. And I saw an ad in the paper for I think it was assistant director at that time, position at Ripon College, working with students, trying to get them to graduate, et cetera. And they used the word Trio in there. And so I applied, interviewed. I don't know how many people were interviewing, but I was given the opportunity to work at the college. And that was my introduction to Trio. So it was kind of an interesting transition for me because I've always been interested in getting students moving from one point of maybe not success to be successful. In my high school career, teaching psychology, history, etc. there was a lot of students in those classes that really didn't take this education thing seriously. So this was a natural kind of transition, but more challenging because, we write grants. And so we're very end oriented in a TRIO. In other words, if you don't get the results, you don't get the money. It's a very unique situation there. So that was my introduction.
Wonderful. And we're going to get to a little more about how you got into TRIO and more of your TRIO experience. But during your intro, we shared that you have a variety of interests and hobbies. Can you talk about what got you into bicycle riding and boating? How did that happen for you?
Oh, interesting. Well, I've always been somebody who liked to run and play basketball, whatever. And I was playing basketball with some friends down in Florida many years ago, and we won too. That was important. But the next morning, I couldn't get out of bed, and I didn't have any traumatic injury, and
Good.
and I went to the physical therapist and medical trainer at a local PT place. And the doctor said, I'm going to let you know within 10 seconds if you have a knee injury. And I said, okay. He said, lie on your stomach. And he lifted my leg up, did a small twist, and I about jumped out of the ceiling. It was that painful.
Oh.
That being said, the place where I was at, they work with the Green Bay Packers. And their doctor, at that time, I think he still is, does the major operations. So I had a knee operation. All that being said, the ligaments in your knee after a knee operation, they atrophy. And so you have to build them up. So they said, have you ever considered or not running anymore, but doing some biking? So that was some time ago. And so I've just gradually been getting more and more involved in biking. I just broke 850 miles this year total.
Wow. Congratulations.
Better than some, not as good as my daughter and her husband. They put me to shame. They just did a 54-mile yesterday in one day. Okay.
Wow.
I'll do 8 to 10, 12, 15 a day, 4 or 5 days a week. So my wife and I, we bike regularly. So it's good exercise, keeps us focused. So boating, I grew up in near a lake in northern Wisconsin, but never had a boat. And so long story short, we decided that we wanted, because we live on Lake Winnebago, which is the largest inland lake in the state of Wisconsin. It runs 36 miles long. And so a lot of people boat here. I didn't want to buy a boat. My wife wanted to buy a boat. We went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, I kind of gave in. Now I love boating. So we boat on this lake in the summertime, and we both enjoy it. So that's something we both like to do together also. We've only had one boat since 1988. It's the same boat. Wow. But the interesting thing, Wisconsin's got maybe 3 or 4 months of nice weather. So the runtime on the engine is only about, for us, 18 hours a year on average over all these years. So exactly. If it was in Florida, you'd never keep a boat that long.
No, not at all.
But here, it's a beautiful boat, and we still run it. Same was since 1988. So yeah.
Wow, marvelous. So we are going to talk about now your TRIO journey, because the path to TRIO, you took it while you were a student, it sounds like. So kind of give us that groundwork. What was that college experience like for you, and how did it all begin? Like getting into that path of you being in college and then finding out about TRIO.
I've thought about this a lot, about what's my passion for working with people who have maybe been underserved or whether. I'm not first generation, but I'm kind of quasi first generation. Both my parents, way back in the day, their parents came right off the boat, as they say, from Yugoslavia. They were, and they spoke Slovenian and Croatian in those homes. They were first generation immigrants, right? I have a older brother and sister. They attempted college and they didn't continue, which is really kind of weird to have both parents who received college degrees at that time not have the two oldest finished college. But that's another long story about why that came about. And I came about, and I've got a younger sister. So I'm the only one in my blood siblings to get a college degree or go to graduate school. Side light here. I was always intellectually curious, loved to read, but I never really liked school, to be perfectly honest with you. So when I came to college, I was kind of blasted academically. I didn't do great. And I don't know if I should, I'll say this to be honest with you. I was
go for it.
with the idea of leaving college after one semester. And to make a
Oh,
long story
yeah.
short, this one guy, I wish I would have his birthday. I would have sent him a birthday card every year. I was on an exit interview, as they had at the university at that time. This guy had my transcript. I didn't know him from Adam, and my exit folder. And I had said that I wanted to join the Peace Corps at that time and work in Africa.
Mhm.
And he looked at me, he looked at these two files, and he says, "This doesn't add up." I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, I used to be in the Peace Corps, and they would never take you. You aren't a good student." I said, I don't like school that much. He says, "Are you running towards Africa or away from school?" That was the most important question anybody's ever asked me in my life. It's still in my head. And I said, "Well, I'd probably run away from school." And he says, "Good. That 5-minute talk lasted 2 hours."
Whoa.
That was my experience in college. I learned to become a student. And this program that I've developed for improving academics, which I do a lot of with students, I've shared that with many, many students over the years about what are the things you need to do to be a good student. So that was my introduction to college. And then I did, I worked with prison inmates in the sociology department, and I worked with disadvantaged populations in several capacities, then did student teaching. And so that was my life. But
Wow.
the point here is I became a good student. It wasn't that, and then I went on to graduate school at Madison. I think my high school teachers would have probably dropped out of their chairs because I did really well there. You know that is. So I guess I can relate to a lot of the students that I work with about when they say that they don't like school or etc. So maybe we'll get into that, but I'm a big proponent of summer research and career internships, and we can maybe get into that.
Yeah. So it sounds like a reawakening for you for education, and that 2 hour conversation, what was supposed to be a 5-minute conversation, turned into
Yeah.
this 2 hour. What was that, the aha moment that said, yes, I need to stay in school and I need to finish this degree, this program?
Right. Well, it was probably always in the back of my head. I've thought about this a lot. My dad was an insurance salesperson for 50 years for a major insurance company, but he never went to work, like punched the clock. It was all open-ended. I think that had somewhat of a negative influence on my older siblings. That's just my take on it. But and he did pretty well in his life. My mother died when I was 13, and so we all had to get a job. I'm too old. We all worked because at that time health insurance wasn't a thing, and so big bills, whatever. I saw the importance, though, of the value of a college degree, and what it could bring, not only for my dad and my mother at that time, but for me. It was always in there. So that's a takeaway there for sure. Maybe adversity and that 2-hour conversation. I don't recall talking about the value of a college degree so much as just doing the work to be successful. The other stuff evolved.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Are you seeking guidance to enhance your TRIO project's effectiveness and success? Look no further. Nosotros Education Center, NEC, is here to empower your TRIO project with expert consulting services. NEC's mission is to promote the effectiveness and impact of TRIO programs. Since 2003, NEC has specialized in providing professional development and in-service staff trainings, allowable cost services, for TRIO projects across the country. The team at NEC, with over 60 years of combined TRIO experience, offers customized workshops and seminars for project staff, compliance assessments, external evaluations, working on and submitting APRs, database customization and training, development of policies and procedures manuals, and project implementation or reorganization services. Additionally, NEC has secured over $774 million in federal funding with a 92% success rate through their live and on-demand proposal workshops, assistance with data collection and review, detailed technical reviews, and comprehensive proposal development services. Join the hundreds of colleges, agencies, and TRIO projects across the country who benefited from NEC's expertise. Nosotros Education Center, your partner in TRIO's project success. Visit their website at nosotros.edu.org. Again, that's nosotrosedu.org.
And now back to the podcast.
So talking about adversity, what challenges did you encounter while you were attending college?
Learning how to study.
Yeah.
I thought, you would read a book, and, I always say the bottom line criteria for getting a high school degree is if you haven't murdered somebody recently and you've got a pulse. Okay, that's okay. I had to learn how to become a student. Now that sounds pretty easy to do, right? I thought it was just kind of reading. No. So I kind of developed a model based on what I'd learned in psychology about spaced repetition and behaviorism, etc. I put that into a program that I used all the way through college, and my grades went up every single semester. It's a very interesting program, and I continue to teach that to students. Because it's, again, all based on measurable behaviors. If you finish those behaviors, and a lot of students have come back to me that were like me, maybe, that they said, this works. And I said, it's not magic, but I was never introduced, I wasn't the top of my class when I was in high school, but I became a really good student, and then I used that at UW-Madison, which is a tough school. Just a case in point, my final examination was 8 hours long, written on 4 questions that I had to come up with answers in those 8 hours. And I used that same template. I think I wrote 30 pages in that 8 hours from memory. Now, I'm not saying anything about that. That has nothing to do with being smart. It has to do with the method that I teach students. How do you do that? So that was my experience in college.
It's interesting because so far in our conversation, you not once said you have to be smart, you have to be intelligent. Not once did you say that. You keep saying behavior, that has to change in order to perform well as a student. So I just find that fascinating that you're focusing on behavior and how that impacts how you get results from studying, performing on tests, performing on assignments. So I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, I talked to students about, and I followed a gentleman, actually, when I first started at Ripon. I went to a conference at Marquette University in Wisconsin, south of here. And his whole focus at Arizona State University for 25 years, I think it was, and he was in business and accounting. He measured attendance and relationship and correlation between attendance and grades. That's a huge school. Yeah. And he found out that the number one predictor for success in college is not IQ, it's not ACT, SAT, it's attendance. It's the core. For a lot of reasons. And I talk about that with students. So that's a vital point.
Absolutely. So we already learned a little bit about how you got into TRIO, but I want to learn more about when you entered TRIO as a worker and being on that end of I would say a semi-professional, right? At that point in TRIO. What did that TRIO program mean to you?
Well, first of all, learning all the terminology that's used in TRIO, the abbreviations and such was a challenge for me. It was different learning about all that. And I thought it would maybe be easier than it came to be in getting students who are underinformed, underserved to get down that path to graduation. It's not easy. I say we work in the trenches every day. A lot of us in TRIO, to be honest with you, are unrecognized by our institution. But interesting thing about this, a lot of people defer down to TRIO program models in using those models for the rest of the institution because these models work. Yes, and I've noticed that a lot. For one example, years ago, we were one of the first schools that I started using. It was at Noel Levis at that time, the college student inventory. It's an assessment tool. And I got trained in this, and people thought, well, that's strange. Why would you want to ask people behavioral based questions about their past history, their future, et cetera, et cetera. And this thing objectifies their subjective perceptions of themselves. Long story short, we used it for years in our program, TRIO, because half the campus at our institution qualifies. It's a high percentage of first generation students. Now the whole school uses it religiously.
Wow.
So that's an example, deferring down, so yeah. But retention is not easy.
It's not. It's very difficult, especially among first generation students that are going semester by semester, evaluating their lives, evaluating themselves, and saying, is this college degree worth it? And on the other end, you have administrators also going, how am I going to keep bringing the student back if there's obstacles, adversity, challenges? And yeah, you explain that so well. Entering TRIO, I'm just very curious. Did you have any other career aspirations before TRIO?
Well, I'm really particularly interested in space exploration. My daughter went to school at Lawrence University, about 25 miles from here, and then she went to school at the University of Arizona. I didn't know anything about that school, but she went there in public health. But part of that whole thing, my interest in space exploration, living in different planets, whatever, I've always had an interest here. And at that institution, they make the largest lenses for the Hubble and all of these deep space exploration telescopes. When I went down to visit, I was in heaven. I'm not kidding you. These things were like 25 feet across.
Wow.
And they make them in the basement of the football stadium. Oh, that's how much room they need. Anyway, I always thought, but I was never really, to be honest with you, I was never great in science and math. So it's more like I go out like 2, 3 in the morning and watch meteor showers. My wife thinks I'm weird that way. But I'll go out and watch meteor showers. I'm very interested in space and science, etc. But that was something I thought, well, maybe if I would have given more time to maybe studying when I was in high school, I could have fulfilled that journey. I don't know. So,
but so still a space enthusiast.
Yes,
yes.
Yeah, I watched. We have relatives in Florida, and we've seen the shuttles go off many times. My wife's daughter's husband works at NASA, and so we've seen the liftoffs there down in Florida. Pretty interesting.
Wonderful. So what would be some career advice you would give to your younger self if you had the power and ability to go back in time and say, this is what you need to prepare for, or what advice would you give to yourself?
I think I would have taken my early years, maybe high school years, a little more seriously as a student in the sciences. And it's, like I said, I've kept a real sharp interest in science and reading about science, but I never really took it to that next level. I think that would be some advice that I would give myself. Our daughter, I hate to admit this, she was a much better student than I was, but in high school and college. But so I've taught her about, not that she wouldn't have been, but she's not first generation. She has that advantage. And I've never described her, getting back to your comment, I've never described, and she's pretty successful. She works with the CDC in the state of Wisconsin in public health, and in terms of blood pressure assessment and cardiovascular and COVID. All right, that's her job. I've never described her as being brilliant, gifted. I don't use those words, coming back full circle. And she was in science and Spanish. So I think she probably picked up on the idea that being a really good student pays off.
Yeah, wonderful. So Daniel, you're on the podcast to share with the audience something that you've been working on. Want to elaborate a little bit on what that is?
Yeah, I've developed a very unique, I don't say that egotistically, but I've never seen this program ever. In TRIO, we were required or mandated by the Department of Education to offer financial literacy, right?
Yeah, that's a core component. Yeah, yeah.
Well, about more than 10 years ago, I write grants for the government, but I also write private grants. I got this grant from the Council for Independent Colleges, co-sponsored and funded by the Walmart Foundation. All right.
Hmm.
And 200 schools applied for this $100,000 grant. And I was one of 20 schools to get this money.
Hmm.
My point here is that the mentor that has taught me what I know about investing in financial literacy, I asked him to come in and do these sessions for my students as part of that grant, although he was never paid. He would never accept any money. That's an interesting piece here I want to get back to. And the other part was setting up paid career internships for all the students. $100,000 went right to them. I didn't take a dime from this. Either did my staff,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
So that is something that I've learned a lot from him. And in the last 4 years, I have received funding from a regional foundation based on investing for early retirement planning for college students. And most of the funding is a very generous foundation. They don't give me a whole ton of money. They don't give a lot of money to all these. I think they fund over 100 organizations a year. It's very generous. They give you maybe a couple thousand, maybe $2,500. And they like this idea. It's the only program that's, of all the 100 that they're funding, is dealing with long-term planning for retirement. And so I'm using this money. Again, I'm not compensated, and I don't have to do this because most of the financial literacy expectations for the DOE, Department of Education, and TRIO programs, it's pretty low expectation. You can do a lot of different things. We go way beyond this. We don't just talk about investing. We're actually giving students money in a certain configuration of investing once they finish these sessions that I've completed with them.
Wow.
And to date,
Okay.
there's 77 students who have gone through these sessions, and they not only have money, we walk the walk, talk the talk, expression, right?
Yeah.
When they finish it, we set them up in a certain configuration for a retirement program at age 18 or 19, which is really great because these kids, they're coming from these disadvantaged backgrounds. Parents never probably invested, didn't have retirement. A lot of them are Pell eligible. And so these students, they're learning some things that they will never learn in college, in any class. And they're never going to learn on the outside the way I present the material. And looking at the evaluations, students have said, wow, I never would have realized such and such, or how to figure out this projection. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years and getting funded. And all these students have gotten money to start retirement programs. It's pretty exciting. The other thing that's interesting here is that, my expression is if you go to a restaurant that somebody recommends to you and you say it's pretty good, I never look at the first time out. I'll give you the analogy here. I ask, would you go back? Would you do it again? Right?
Would you do it again?
Here's my point. I ask my students, now you're 4 years out, people who've now graduated, are you continuing to invest in this particular way? And not all, but many of them have continued in their summer jobs or jobs on campus. They've continued to do what I've told them that's important to do to get to where they need to be down the road. Now, most people are thinking where they're going to have for lunch today, right? Right? These students are now thinking about 20, 25 years down the road if they stay with the plan.
That is mind-bending because you're looking, what you're essentially doing is you're helping students understand their life 20 to 25 years from now and not settling for immediate gratification, which a lot of students, especially 18-year-olds, are more prone to do, is to spend their money for more immediate things. So, and we'll get to that here in just a bit, but there is a huge movement happening in the college age and younger population trying to understand how money works and making sure that students, by the part of the university or even TRIO programs, help them understand how money also affects their lives. To be frank, I'm still learning so much about this aspect of finances. What caused you to pour time and effort into this project?
Well, I was never taught about investing as I said, my dad did pretty well, as being he was a kind of an entrepreneur. He was hired by an insurance company, but he worked for himself. But we never talked about investing. Now, he came out of the Depression era, and so did my wife's father. And so I think that population, they never emphasized investing in the stock market or the bond market. They thought of more safe investing instruments, right? So I was never exposed to, I wish now in retrospect, I mean, I kind of say this jokingly, if I would have known now what I didn't know then, I wouldn't be talking to you. Okay. So no, I would.
I would hope
But
that you'd still be.
but I guess, and that's what I kind of tell my students that I said at age 18, wow, if I would have the knowledge back then of what I know now. And this is the interesting thing, and when we get to this, is that what knowledge am I talking about? What information am I talking about? That's what I share with these students, and when we may get to that. So it was probably born out of the idea that looking at how much time, I didn't really get into the idea of investing really until I really started working at Ripon College, and I was involved in a 403B. And that's when I started to think about, matching funds. And I'll have some stories that will just blow my students' brains when I tell them about stuff of missed opportunities that they cannot overlook. It's
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Daniel, students and their families are going into debt to afford a college education. Many college-going students are ready to sign for something that they may not truly understand. Does your financial literacy program aim to make learners more informed consumers about what they're signing up for or what they're doing with their money?
It's a great question. I just gave a presentation during orientation sessions to our students, first generation students, in our bridge program. The bridge program idea coming in before the start of school. And I've showed them the most recent statistics from Georgetown University. They do all the work on career projections in this country. I looked at them and they talked about all of the jobs in the next 10 to 15 years that will not only assume that a four-year degree will be powerful, it will require a four-year degree. And I list all of these to students.
Yeah.
It is a very powerful presentation. Then I look and show them a chart that looks at what people's wealth status is, regardless of race and ethnicity, if you have a four-year college degree compared to people with a technical college degree or just a high school degree. And it's staggeringly different. All right. Wealth accumulation, which is a big issue in this country, right? The differences between people who have a lot and people who have nothing. And so I talk to students about, I know it's expensive. It's an investment. It is an investment. And I do show them a national chart. Ripon's in there, so is other schools, right? About what someone could assume to have accumulated if they have a four-year college degree 10, 20, 30, and 40 years down the road. So I know it's expensive, and that whole controversy about loan forgiveness, boy, that's another whole conversation. We had an exchange student some years ago that from Italy, and they don't understand college debt there because it's government supported. If you want to go to college, you don't go into debt because the countries support, you if you want to go into college, or like in Germany, technical college or four-year college, they track people. That's something that we don't do very well in this country, is track people early on about what would be a nice path either way. And so I think I answered the question. I told you that I did.
No, yeah, you did wonderfully. Okay. And what you did was you expanded on a topic I think that is definitely related to money management, is choosing careers and how those careers impact how much wealth we accumulate over time, which is also a very critical conversation. I know we're limited to our time, but hopefully maybe in a future podcast you and I can talk about wealth accumulation and careers.
Yes, for sure.
So, in what ways does your program prepare students in handling finances? Because you're talking about retirement, which is for students 40, 50 years, 60 years down the line.
Mhm.
And for non-traditional students who are in their mid 20s or even older that have never thought about money finances, how is that preparing them, currently?
Mm. Uh, I talk to students about choices, choices that are being made with discretionary money. I know our students, especially our trio students, don't have a lot of money in, or a lot of them, almost every one of them works, right? In some capacity in the summer or throughout the year.
Hmm.
But I talk to them about even small amounts of money in a certain configuration over time, even 5 to 10%, if you get paid $100 a week or whatever,
Hmm.
instead of using that on something that you don't really need, it could even be one less cup of coffee at a prominent place,
Hmm.
one less. And well, I have 1 cup a day. I grind my own beans at 36 cents a cup. Okay, that's what I do. And I know, and
Hmm.
I also get rebates from a place called Menards. Okay, I'll go there, Menards, get, and but it all adds up. So my point is that this whole idea of making choices and investing that choice
Hmm.
into a retirement fund has to be a priority. Because if
Hmm.
you wait and say, well, I'll do it later, that doesn't happen. That's why these 401k and 403b programs, as controversial as they are versus pensions, um, it's the best avenue right now because all the money you're putting aside pre-tax, you don't even notice after
Hmm.
5, 10, 15, or as you know, in your school, assuming you have that. Um, so those are choices that you make. Now, interestingly, the law says now, it used to be discretionary, where a company or a private institution, they could give people the option of joining the 401k, 403b. Now you have to put them in and let them unjoin, and nobody
Hmm.
ever unjoins.
Hmm.
But not all the people join under their own volition. It's
Hmm.
very interesting psychological. They're in
Very.
it if like it comes under the expression that sometimes people don't know what's good for them.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And those 401ks and 403bs, it's as shocking as it may sound, some people choose not to join. They won't do it on their own. But if they're in it, then they will not stop it typically. It's very
Yeah.
weird psychologically.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So and I'll share this story with you very quickly, Daniel, that when I first started as a professional, fresh out of college, just graduated, started my first job, they gave me these options, right? Of like, so where would you like to elect your contributions for your retirement? Not the very first thing I was thinking about.
Hmm.
I wasn't thinking about retirement, right? And
Right.
so I remember asking my HR person, what do you think? And they're like, I can't tell you. Legally, I
Right.
cannot give you advice. You have to choose. And
Right.
so I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember feeling overwhelmed. So that just speaks to this, uh, I guess, very lack of knowledge on the part of students and uh, having to read through those benefits can feel overwhelming.
Oh, it is. It is for sure. Just as one side piece as it related, I talk to my students that if they plan to stay, and not all of our students are from the state of Wisconsin, but many of them are. I said, just so you know, and I think we'll get into that, but I tell them things that they're not going to be told
Hmm.
because see, I have no financial vested interest. That's what, and I think we might get to this. Why is my program different? I have no financial interest or vested interest in their money. I'm a
Hmm.
financial educator.
Hmm.
So on that point, I talked to them about the Wisconsin pension program. My
Hmm.
wife's in it, and she's now a semi-retired as a principal of elementary schools. And my daughter and her husband are in the pension. It's rated, depending on who you read, as one, two, or three of the best rated pension programs in the United States. It's
Wow.
103% funded. In other words, the way it's structured, quote unquote, it'll never run out of money.
Wow.
And it's just not teachers, but people who are garbage collectors, people who are in prison systems. Anything public goes into that fund. And it's very well managed. And I talked to them and I said, you need, if you are looking between state A and state B,
Mhm.
I would ask, what is the status of the state pension program if you're going to work for public? All right. It's just something that students, they weren't aware of this. They aren't aware of it because nobody talks to them in very direct, simple language. It's always like done through a sieve or something of a vested interest.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. But
No. And kind of like you said, kind of perfect segue into this next question because your program does stand out in that you're really helping. You said you have no vested interest in the students' money. You want them to be successful in that money. So, and I want to highlight this point that there's already a lot of financial advice being thrown around. We have that from social media via TikTok, YouTube, various other social media platforms, and self-proclaimed financial gurus that are experts who provide what I would consider sound advice. So when someone looks to you and say, what different advice do you have, or what's making your program more unique than what other financial gurus are offering? What do you say to that, or how would you respond?
well, I do say that you have to ask the person that you're talking to, what's in it for you? And I'm not saying anything about, I know people in the financial investing field. I know that, okay? But I talk to my students about you have to be aware of certain kinds of expenses that are never, ever directly given to people. When Obama was president, and who's the one from Massachusetts, the senator,
Oh,
he appointed her to be the person that would be overseeing the Financial Responsibility Act or something, and was requiring investment companies to reveal in writing, and credit card companies, what exactly you're going to be paying for based on these expenses. Boy, there was pushback on that. You just
oh
wouldn't
yeah.
believe. Not all companies, though, okay, did push back. They kind of welcomed it. So this idea of fiduciary responsibility and transparency, boy, now it's kind of come full circle when people have kind of like sliced and diced it. How you, I look at it this way. People are never actually ever necessarily lied to. They just aren't told the whole truth.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I look at investing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole piece of important sets of information that I talk to my students about. We don't have time here maybe today, that they will never learn objectively from somebody else that is selling them something.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I've learned over time, is that, who reads a 55-page prospectus on an investment fund?
Nobody.
Nobody. I do, because I know what to look for, but
Mm-hmm.
and I share that information. I give them in my sessions. I show them the particular fund that I'm putting them in, and I show them this is what you will be paying if you are not aware. Some of my students, they come in and now they're talking the language.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
pretty savvy. They've learned. I don't know if I can say this, but they're kind of become college educated people and students in my sessions. They become professional BS detectors.
No, that's good to say. No, yeah,
Okay,
it's good to
okay.
say.
They know what to hear and listen
Mm-hmm.
for, and so they can make good decisions, because what makes this program unique is that people are getting unvarnished information, which is
Mm-hmm.
very rare, and it gets them past the fear
Mm-hmm.
of losing
Mm-hmm.
all their money. Those are the two things that happen in these sessions, where students are becoming less fearful,
Mm-hmm.
and they're getting good information to make good decisions. If I didn't go into now, I told them, hey, I could save you a lot of time and me by just telling you to do this. I said, but you will never continue doing it unless you understand why.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And this is a kind of the perfect part of the program on the podcast where we can have you take the mic. Can you give us a sample of your program, things that you cover, and what is the structure of your curriculum?
Mm. Well, I do give them a view. It doesn't come in sequence here necessarily, but I do introduce each of my sessions with a very kind of humorous but very powerful example on the concept of expenses and investing. And I give my students four similar things, four exactly things to choose from, and what the expense is on those four items. That's my introduction. And every time the student will take the least expensive item on that set on the desk. And I'm saying, that's what you think. But I will guarantee you that if you don't understand from these sessions, you will end up paying not 40 cents. You may not pay $4. You may end up paying $10 or $20 for the same exact item, and you won't even know it. Now, how did I get involved in this? My mentor, who lives probably no more than a half mile away from me, I didn't know that at the time, he does these sessions for people who are older, 70s, late 60s, 80s. And you would think that the information that comes out of these sessions, and I've kind of like abbreviated it, you'd think that people would be really happy and excited about hearing it. He's told me, he said, people are angry and somewhat depressed because what they've learned after all these years of not knowing where all that money went, and is shocking when they do this. So I want to try to, I guess what motivated me, I want to share this to try to ward off students down the road saying, geez, I wish I would have known about this earlier. Because the stuff that I tell them, it's just not the hows, but the whys. And they make their own decision about that. So we talk about making decisions, having really good, sound, objective information, asking really good questions. That's kind of like the preface of the curriculum. Then we go into, like I said, expenses and what to look out for, the hidden expenses that people are not aware of, that a company has to publish in some capacity, but they never tell you up front. Thus, the never lying, never telling you the whole truth, unless you ask them specifically. And our students are being trained to ask those questions.
That's fantastic. So I want to get back to your kind of retirement planning because when students hear you should start saving early, that may mean a lot of things to different students. When they hear start saving early, they're thinking a trip for entertainment, to go to the latest concert, get the latest piece of technology. The iPhone 16 just came out, so they may be thinking, how can educators such as yourself reframe this to help students look at the bigger picture? Because I guess it's still mind-bending to me, right, to think about retirement in that long term, and students are still very much in the now.
Right. It's a great question. I mean, we're, 70% plus of our country's GDP is based on consumption. Way back in the day, it was production. We don't produce that much stuff. We were just in Target just recently, and everything that we saw, everything that turned over was made in a different country, right? We're consuming all these products. That's what keeps our economy going. So it's hard to talk to students who are 18. We have all this coming at us about buy, consume, right? This is where I talk to students about, and I don't share real intimate details about my investing, I guess, success in our family.
Sure, yeah.
But I do give them a general idea on what they can expect if you follow these simple practices. I try to take what is seemingly overwhelming information and make it very simple for people to follow. Not that they're lacking information. It's just that people make investing so challenging that people get afraid of doing it. They're afraid of making the wrong decision. And the way I talk to students about is that there aren't any wrong decisions in my experience, in my training, in my information. The wrong thing to do is not doing a small amount over a long period of time and letting compounding work for you. I look at it this way. I don't I don't work for an Amazon or a Tesla or Microsoft, etc. But I talk about, what if I own those companies
Mm-hmm.
in a certain configuration, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if that happened? What would that company I was working for me? And I give those examples. I show students examples from my portfolio, not in specific terms, but the growth of certain things that have come over time based on not that I'm so brilliant, but the company is so productive.
Mm-hmm.
And getting back to your point, I know people are exposed to all these get rich quick things.
Oh, yeah.
Day trade here, TikTok, da 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 da. Well, I know the research about that, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work over the long term. You might make some money on Monday, but you might lose it on Tuesday. A friend of mine who's known for 40 years was in that business for years,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't do very well by trying to day trade constantly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I think that's very important information that the audience, whether they're trio professionals now or even students that are listening, that it's important to hear.
Mm.
And I'm going to say this, to be perfectly honest with you, Daniel. Retirement to me, and I'll say this before I say this, it's retirement is always, I guess, even when I was in school, it was always presented with a sense of urgency. So there was always this anxiety about retirement. So I distinctly remember being 18 and a a teacher's talking about retirement, saying how important it was. It didn't register at the time. It didn't register to me. But now, retirement to me sounds urgent, right? Because being in my 40s has forced me to think about the future. I have tops 25 years of good working years left. And I want to be able to enjoy my life after retirement. But I distinctly remember still being in my 20s, not thinking about retirement, not thinking about that long term, but now being in my 40s, now approaching it with a sense of urgency. And that's a challenge for a lot of first generation college students to think that far ahead. How can we think differently about retirement? What can we do? What can we say to help students think differently about when they're 65, when they're 67?
Mm. Well, that's just a great question. I'll give you one example. We've got a family business that we've had for many years in our family, and our daughter has worked, and her husband has worked in our business. Right? This is something side for us. When she was like 16 years old, and this is under the umbrella of continual information, talking about it. Most people, they say, "What do you not talk about it at Thanksgiving?" Politics, religion, and money, right?
Top
Well,
three.
we talk about money a lot, right? So
Ah.
this. So one morning after she'd worked for the weekend for us, there was 3 piles of money sitting on the table, and she'd gone off, done something, and she said, "Dad, this first pile is for part of my college. The second pile is for me to spend, and the third pile is for my Roth." Now, I started talking about this when she was an early teen. And you know what she did, right? Rolled her eyes. Who cares? Da, 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 da.
Oh, yeah.
She's been investing in this now for over 15 years. She doesn't complain anymore.
Well, that's good.
She still does the same thing now as a supplement to her state pension program.
Wow.
She contributes every single month. And no more eye rolling, no more complaining about hearing it. And funny story, a couple of years ago, she works out of Milwaukee and Madison. Anyway, so she goes to a coffee shop, and she was on I think a Zoom meeting. Anyway, it was interrupted, and she called and texted me, and she said, "I got to talk to you." She's sitting in this booth next to somebody who is trying to sell somebody on a financial investing plan, right next to him. And she called me up and she said, "They're telling him all the wrong stuff." I mean, it was really funny, from A to Z, that she is very sensitive to hearing about this. And now I've helped a number of her friends start investing programs because they never learned about this growing up. But so that's the point about, my point here is that I continue to email my students reminding them. You hear it once, it's not going to take. But I don't care if they're sick of hearing from me. Okay. They have to hear it over and over again in order for it to become part of their life.
Yes. But also to your point, and you made this point earlier, she's become a really good BS detector, as
Yes.
in really sensitive to what financial advice is being shared. And when people talk about money, able to decipher and decode all that. So that's wonderful.
Now
Wonderful.
I told her, I said, don't go over the booth and tell them that. Say,
So, Daniel, financial literacy also means understanding debt to income ratio. And that term gets thrown out a lot. I think students, and I get the sense that they're like, oh, well, whatever I owe and whatever I make, that's kind of like the basic concept. But this is something that I'm still working to understand. Can you give us a summary of this concept and why is it important? What are we misunderstanding about debt to income ratio?
well, our first introduction to debt to income ratio, we were renting, after I got married. And then this is something that was interesting. We bought and lived in a duplex for 9 years. And we lived on the bottom and we had people renting from the top from an old building. It was a beautiful old building. And so we got to the point of saying, wow, we could have, and people have to rent sometimes. Somebody's got to rent, right? So we were fortunate to always have for 9 years somebody renting and paying a good portion of our mortgage for 9 years. When we went to get a loan, we came across this debt to income ratio equation. And they said, you have to have, at that point, we're looking for how much debt you have on a monthly basis divided by your gross income for the month. It should be, these days, no more than 36% in that. To take that divided by your debt on a month divided by your gross income.
Right.
You could go up to about 46% in terms of buying a home. That's how we got introduced to this, the debt to income ratio. I would assume that it still applies to buying a car. When they run, they ask you about how much you make and what's your what is your outstanding debt? What's your they ask you all those questions, right? They want to know, can you afford to pay for what you want to buy? Now, in the housing crisis, as you recall a few years ago, wow, and all those banks were threatened and they got bailed out, right? People didn't get bailed out. Banks got bailed out. They were not being honest with people. They let a lot of people who probably shouldn't qualify to own a home buy the home, and their debt to income ratio was way beyond 50, 55%. And then the other part about that, they were buying adjustable rate mortgages versus fixed mortgages, which after a few years, they might have gotten in at 4%, but then they readjusted to 8%, doubled. That's why a lot of people lost their homes. So point being, the debt to income ratio is used particularly when you want to buy a home or like a vehicle, etc. So it's really a simple formula of your debt on a monthly basis divided by your gross income. It should be between 36 and maybe at a top 46, depending upon what kind of job you had, how long you're working at it. Like, you've been in Trio for how long? How many years?
Oh my gosh, I've been in Trio close to 15 years. I'm working in a different capacity now for the institution, but I was in it for about 14 years.
Right. So your longevity is a huge factor. If you were working there a year and your income to debt ratio was pushing up at the top end, they might have a question about, is that a secure source of income? And they might also ask you, how much do you have in savings? So if somebody's gonna go on the point of not being able to pay for their mortgage, they want to know what's the safety net for them. They want to know what could they tap into if they have to go after somebody. I know it's kind of a negative kind of thing to think about, but these people are lending you money. Surely they want to make money. So
sure.
So that's what that's used for.
Right on. So we were talking about housing and the housing market. The housing market has scared a lot of college students. Some are thinking that they never be able to afford a home. I see the TikTok videos, I see the memes.
Mm,
How can students better prepare to make a pathway toward home ownership starting now?
mm. Well, again, I mentioned this, some people would want to do this. Some people are not aware of this, but if one was thinking of buying a home, something to look at would be um, doing a duplex, living in one part and having somebody else at your beginning. That's what created a foundation. And then we lived for 9 years. Then we sold that and used that profit to build
Hmm.
our home that we've been in since 1991 now. Okay, in Oshkosh.
Hmm.
That was it wasn't anything that we didn't get any money from anybody. It was something that we just built up equity, sold that property. Um, and this is another thing, might some people might consider. It depends on the individual. We owned quite a few duplexes based after that situation for like 30 years.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
now, being a landlord, you got some challenges there, right?
Sure,
Um,
sure.
Fortunately, nobody ever ruined any of our properties. Okay, that was a good thing. But I heard some horror stories there. And sometimes you got to be aware of things. But using real estate to your advantage it
Hmm.
worked for us for a long time. Then we sold all those properties off because I don't want to deal with that anymore after 30 years, right? But that created an avenue for us. And some friends of ours did the same thing. It's interesting. They lived and owned a duplex for many years and used that money to fund their home, a single family home. But I agree with you. That's a big issue in this country. I know that in the debates, I know that Harris is talking about building new homes in this country,
Hmm.
moderately priced homes. There's a lot of reasons for home ownership, why it's important. I'm not trying to undercut people who are in the rental industry, but you don't build any equity being in a rental. You
Oh,
want
no,
to,
you don't. Yeah.
right. So those are some things that I would suggest people investigate for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you for that advice, Daniel. Investing also sounds very intimidating. Are you familiar with the film The Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio. I've seen that movie many times, right? Yeah,
Great.
yeah, yeah.
So for many college students, they may think of investing as Wolf of Wall Street. It's a rich person's game. How do we think about investing differently?
Well, I think about that. Example, my daughter was looking at a bunch of schools when she was coming out of high school. And long story short, she was looking at a school in our conference called Lake Forest College in Illinois, right? It was one of her
Hmm.
choices. And at that time, I was really, really interested in seeing the headline for their school was that two ladies, I think they were sisters that lived right across the street from the college, had invested for many, many years, just over a long period of time. And they
Hmm.
weren't high level administrators or anything. They had jobs, whatever. They donated $7 million of their estate. It was the highest one-time contribution at that time.
Whoa.
And they were not rich people. They were very moderate, and they were older. I think they've passed away now. But I was very impressed with the idea of when they were asked about this, how did they accumulate that much money? That they
Hmm.
just did it a little bit at a time over a long period of time and let the market and let compounding work for them in making
Hmm.
careful adjustments, not going onto the next best wildest scheme like some companies talk about. I know some people talk about buy gold, buy,
Oh, buy
but
silver and yeah, yeah.
right, or buy the newest stock or whatever.
Hmm.
That to me is I don't do that. I don't propose that students should do that. It's their life. I just talk to them about the way we've configured it. This is what will work based on the textbook evidence. And I bring out the textbooks and all the little post-it notes that I've read and show them what do the people who know about investing, including Warren Buffett, what do they say about a certain investing style? I mean, these people are all successful. They're not into day trading. They're not into buying gold. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just that there's a certain way to think about money that I'm trying to teach our students.
Absolutely. So the next question is going to give you put you on the hot seat a little bit, Daniel.
Oh,
Give us your hot take about finance, an opinion that you feel it could be unfiltered. Give us your hot take on finance.
well, first of all, just think about that. You have to watch out who you listen to. You have to be aware of who that person is. I'll give you a good example. Many years ago, my wife and I were having dinner with a former judge and his wife, and he was talking about a particular type of investing that we do these days. Okay. And I was not investing that way until I found out that he was right. Okay. And he had no vested interest in it. He wasn't a financial person, but I found out by reading and learning. I think in order to make good financial decisions, you have to have good information. I think I don't have any hot tips about short of the idea that I have ownership in some major companies through stock investing,
Sure.
but that's not our core. That's not our bullseye. That's kind of like on the sidelines. You have to have a core of things that are secure and measurable over time.
Absolutely. Good take. I like that. From what you've shared, Daniel, it sounds like you're assisting students to help them realize that their hard-earned money can work for them.
Yes, that is true. If they make a choice between something discretionary, unnecessary, or something that's really important and necessary, and putting that money into working for you, that is what I want to try to teach my students.
Wonderful. Now, knowing full well with the full disclaimer, we are not financial advisors, and any decisions that students make are independently and their own. So we strongly urge our audience always consult a financial advisor. But Daniel, if you could talk to a student and give them recommended first steps, what can be done now to ensure a stable and financial future?
Trying to understand the long-term impact, and I show my students 100 years of the stock market returns, 100 years, not 1 year, 2 years, that they have to understand how do you capture that growth, which is directly reflective of the economy. And I talked to them about the 1929 market crash.
Oh yeah,
they've heard that until hell freezes over, right? It just is endless. That's what's in their brains. They're going to lose all their money. I said, but that's one big fear. I tell them, if you have good information, your fear will be reduced about losing all of your money. I've never known anybody to lose all their money. Could a 1929 happen again? There's so many safeguards on our economy now and in the stock market. That's just not probably going to happen. But I show them you have to think long term and look at the economy and how it's expanded. Absolutely.
It's very important. Daniel, it sounds like a lot of benefit that TRIO programs can gain from your program. So a lot of benefit to first generation students, pre-college and college students. How can a TRIO program or educator reach out to you to gain more information?
Well, my website is currently being revised and updated, so I can't give you that link there, but they can get a hold of me at DJ and KRHIN at gmail.com. That's D like in dog, J like in jelly, K like in kite, R like in Robert, H like in Henry, I like in indigo, N like in Nancy, DJ Krhin at gmail.com, or they could call 920-279-2466. And I do really, to be perfectly honest with you, I do have an interest and mission in taking this beyond what I've been doing at my institution. There's a huge need in this country for people to understand what exactly they're going to have to do to get beyond the fear and the misinformation about investing. And that's what I've been doing with our students for the last number of years. And it's working. I can see it working.
Wonderful.
Now,
Go ahead, Daniel.
I kind of joke with them. I said, with this advice, I only take 10%. But but as a financial educator, I'm not an advisor. I'm not an investor. I'm an educator. I can tell them things that they will never hear objectively. That's what I can offer.
Absolutely. So one more time for those folks who are interested in contacting you, we will include Daniel's contact information on the podcast description. You can look at it now, and it'll be on the podcast description. Daniel, one more time for those listening, you don't have to spell anything out, just your Gmail and your phone number.
djkrhin@gmail.com, 920-279-2466.
Awesome. I hope educators out there reach out to you. I think financial literacy is extremely important in navigating the modern world. And we thank you again for taking this time to explain a lot of these things to us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. I mean, it's really when people kind of joke, is that the only thing you talk about? No, I talk about stuff that I read, et cetera, et cetera. I like to read. But it is definitely a focus. I think it's important for us, but also for many, many other people.
Absolutely. So Daniel, now we're in the part of the podcast where we're going to talk a little bit more again about you. What is some advice you would give to your TRIO professionals listening out there in the podcast, or even TRIO professionals there in your state?
Well, I would say that not giving up on students, no matter how frustrating some of these students are. I always remind myself that there are some students coming into your TRIO programs that are hitting the ground running. They don't really need necessarily to learn how to become a better student. They learn, what do you do with a college degree? Mm-hmm. I'll give you one example. I'm a big proponent from school to work programs, internships, and summer research. I placed lots of people in both. At our institution, we don't have professional degrees like physical therapy, or we now have engineering for the first time ever, or nursing we don't have, but we place people in public health, physical therapy, nursing over the years without ever having any programs. It's very important, I think, that TRIO professionals learn to cobble together coursework that would get those students into those high demand careers. Then the other thing is that a lot of people do not know how to articulate, how do you get into a summer research program? These students need to be taken by the hand, and I am the main editor at our program, letting students know what are the main things you have to address in an application statement that they don't know about. So TRIO professionals have to be really intrusive, this intrusive advising kind of thing. I always go on the assumption, I tell people when I first meet them, I said, I will help you get to where you want to be if you're open to letting me see how are you articulating your skills and accomplishments. And usually, I bleed all over their essays, if you've been perfectly honest with you. They write it, but I edit it. And so I think TRIO professionals, that's a lot of hard work, especially when we're doing McNair and SSS at the same time. I'm not kidding. I was up at 2-3 morning for 10 years editing out students' applications for graduate schools. Wow. So that's advice to professionals, is not to give up and to give students hope. And a lot of this is about hope. Is they're coming from backgrounds where maybe they're getting negative feedback, like from their parents or somebody in their family saying, this isn't worth it. It is definitely worth it.
Absolutely. What about advice for TRIO students?
Use resources. I devised this program when I first started Ripon. I always thought about, like everybody, tutoring is for people who are failing, all the negative connotations surrounding tutoring, right? It's like the sign of the devil, I say, right? Right. I said, why would we want to create a tutoring program that is in response to failure? And I gave I said,
Mhm.
They're an athlete. You practice your whole life, right? For the game. If you're a musician, or if you're a debater, or if you're into forensics, you practice, right?
Right.
Everybody buys into that. I said,
Right.
what about practicing becoming a student? And they'll say, what do you mean? I said, like tutoring. And I'll tell them, for the last hour, I've been tutoring you in how to become a good student. And that's normal, right? And
Yeah.
that feels okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, tutoring, here's the ironic thing about this. Contrary to what people think, at our institution, and I'm sure other institutions, if they had this kind of model, and it's not an easy model to institute, is that we have students who are the top students getting almost all the tutoring every semester. The students who are failing, they hardly ever get any tutoring. You have to kind of like take their arm and sign the application. I've got
Right.
some students who are top of the class, summa cum laude, who get tutored every single semester. They're not going to fail anything. And I tell people this, but you have to give people examples that are concrete. And they'll say, oh, wow, if these students are getting tutoring, it must be good enough for them. And they're not failing anything. They start the first day of the semester. Quick piece here. One of our students graduated summa cum laude last year, 4.0 in chemistry and biology. She's going to grad school, right? All that being said, she'd be the least likely person for most students to think that would get tutoring. I said, my hand is on whatever book you want to say is the holy book. She got tutoring twice a semester in every single semester she was in college. I said, you have to admit that sounds odd, but that is actually more normal at our school. It is our biggest challenge is to get people who are reluctant, who are failing, who you'd think would be the first people to knock at your door. They're the least likely to ask for tutoring.
Mhm.
It's totally weird.
Yeah, I like your reframe though, because I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of institutions that approach tutoring as a response to a student failing or not doing well in class. And I like the reframe of we should look at tutoring as this is practice. This is you, like an athlete, like a musician, practicing to be that good student, to be good at that subject. So I love the reframe, Daniel. Thank you so much for sharing that.
For sure.
What is one word you would use to describe yourself?
Determined, I guess.
Determined. I like that.
Determined. Yeah.
I very much like that.
Mhm.
What is something that you are currently reading, watching, or listening to, whether it's a book, TV, film, podcast, or music?
I just finished reading A Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood.
Mhm.
I watched the series on Hulu a couple years ago, and it was, to be perfectly honest with you, I've seen, like a lot of people, I've seen a lot of things on Netflix or whatever. It's the most powerful series I've ever seen. And the book, which was years before the series, I don't know if you've read that or saw that series at all. A
I've
Handmaid's
seen
Tale.
like first two episodes.
Well, it's pretty, in my opinion, it is a foreshadowing of what is emerging in this country. And I don't say that lightly. All right.
Hmm.
Some of the things that are happening in that book, in that series, are emerging today in our culture. It's very concerning to me. I've also gone to see Hamilton 3 or 4 times with our students. I think if I had my wish, A Handmaid's Tale and Hamilton would be 2 things that people in America should be required to be exposed to. The other thing I just finished reading was a really interesting book in science called What an Owl Knows. I was coming home listening to NPR one day.
Hmm.
Wow, I was blown away. They were interviewing a scientist who studies owls all over the world. And I love raptors, and I love going to raptor presentations like in our area at the zoo.
Uh-huh.
I'm very interested in that. And I picked up this book, and every page I learned something totally new about owls. Fascinating. So those
Yeah.
things are interesting to me.
Give us some
Uh,
highlights. Yeah.
yep. So we watch Netflix specials once in a while. I don't have a huge amount of time. I'm always amazed that people can rattle off series after series after series that they watch. I said, where do you find the time to do that? but yeah, I did see the new version of or the new take on. I love the Alien series, Aliens, and then I've seen all of those. So I like science fiction a lot and
Right
futuristic
on.
kind of things.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much again, Daniel, for sharing a little bit about yourself and teaching us about financial literacy. It has been a joy and a pleasure learning from you. So thank you so much for stopping by the podcast.
Well, thank you for giving me the time to share some ideas and talk with you. I mean, it sounds like, you've got a great sense of humor, which is really nice to see. And I'm sure your students in whatever capacity really probably like working with you, which is a nice thing. It's a great
Thank
thing.
you very much, Daniel. And likewise, you are very much a gravitate toward just by our emails. And then when we talked over on that phone, I really loved your energy, loved the passion that you had displayed. And again, thank you and congratulations on many years of service with Trio. You have certainly an inspiration to many, many students. Daniel, we have a tradition on the Let's Talk Trio podcast where we have the guests sign off. We are at the end. Do you care to do the honors?
Oh, sure. My name is Daniel Krhin. I'm the Executive Director of Student Support Services at Ripon College, a TRIO program. And I emphasize financial literacy, particularly talking about specific things about investing for retirement. And I just think that TRIO programs and the Department of Education are crucial to uplifting people as they go forward and coming into college. It's such a great thing for so many reasons. So I do appreciate this opportunity for the TRIO Let's Talk program that you're sponsoring is really important, very important. And TRIO does work. TRIO works for sure. We've seen it over the years that students have become successful. It's a very, very effective program, fundamental for the Department of Education to continue to fund these programs.
The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. It's important to note that investing involves risk, and past performance is not indicative of future results. Any investment decision should be made based on your own research and with guidance of a qualified financial advisor. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of any affiliated companies or organizations.
Are you a participant, alum, or staff of a TRIO program? Do you want your program highlighted? You or your program could be featured in an upcoming episode of Let's Talk TRIO. Get a hold of us by going to our Facebook page or Instagram and send us a direct message. Search for Let's Talk TRIO. We want to get your story to the public.
That was our guest, Daniel Krhin, TRIO Executive Director at Ripon College. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your TRIO story and discussing finances. Remember, if you would like to be on the Let's Talk TRIO podcast or know a staff, advocate, participant, or alumni, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. A huge thanks to our individual supporters, Angelica Villalpando, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jeff Naputi, Angelica Valdez, Rosario Riley, Felicia Rivera, Jaded Electronics, and Eric Lemaster. A huge thanks also goes to our corporate sponsors, TRIOJoblist.com, Nosotros Education Center, thetriostore.com, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for graduation stoles. And Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can be a sponsor of the Let's Talk TRIO podcast in one of three ways. Become a monthly patron on Patreon. Our base level starts at $1 a month. Become a corporate sponsor by placing an ad on the podcast. Email us for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast business PayPal account. Our handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. I'd like to take a moment to thank our honorary members of the Let's Talk TRIO podcast, Roderick Chambers, Tony Ho, Scott Kendall, and Susan Cramp. The Let's Talk TRIO podcast team is John Russell, audio engineer, music producer and composer, and post-production editor. Amelia Castañeda, script supervisor, marketing manager, social media manager, and producer. Juan Rivas, executive producer and host. Be sure to follow the Let's Talk TRIO podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. This episode was recorded Sunday, October 20th, 2024. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.